Always get smarter talking to this guy. He's one of the best who's ever done it. Longtime president and general manager in this league. Certainly serving with distinction all those years in Philadelphia and formerly of the Cleveland Browns organization. Joe Banner joining us back on this program. How are you, Joe? Good to see you, sir.
What's up, Joe?
I'm doing good, and I'm not going to deny I got a little kick out of your introduction, including the Browns' recent mishap.
Yeah, so. I don't know if did you see this video, Joe, of somebody falling off the side of the barge? That one?
You couldn't script it better, could you?
This just in. Not really. All right, so what is happening, do you think, with Micah Parsons and the Dallas Cowboys, Joe, and how do you think it's all going to work out or not? Joe, what do you think?
Well, it will work out in the last week before the season starts, as it does every time Jerry's in one of these situations. Jerry is doing what he does, and we should be clear, there are some really smart GMs in this league, like Bill Polian. I think he was Executive of the Year like 4 or 5 times in the Hall of Fame, who believe that every single minute the risk of injury and play quality is on the player versus the team is a huge win for the team. So they wait till the last minute to do deals. I mean, you remember Peyton Manning had a tag on him while they were negotiating his deal. He got all the way to the point where he would have been a free agent without the tag. And they're still negotiating his contract. So there is a group of people, including some really smart people, that think waiting has benefits. Now, I've never believed that. I think we were the first team to start doing deals 2 years early because I felt like by waiting, you're handing a lot of leverage to the player because at that point, you got to do a deal 2 years early. You may not do a deal. You get 2 more shots at it. But, he's doing what he's always done. I think it's the wrong thing, but I also think it's a mistake for people like, oh, is this going to ruin the Cowboys season? Or did last year when this happened ruin the Cowboys season? Because we've seen really smart GMs that believe in this philosophy. Now, as the cap has gone up so much, as contract values are going up, Myles Garrett did a deal a couple of years ago for $25 million. He did a deal a couple of months ago for $40. So the price of waiting is massively higher than it ever was. Yet Jerry's sticking with that philosophy. He's being true to himself. He's actually following the steps of some smart people. But I think it's a dated philosophy at this point.
Joe Banner here on the Rich Eisen Show. Did you like the T.J. Watt deal? Do you think the Steelers should have done that, Joe?
Well, I think they should have done it sooner, and then I think they were stuck. But allocating $40 million to that position, which to me, you can see what the Eagles did when I was there and since. The defensive line is massively important. You can cover up so many weaknesses. We lost the Super Bowl to the Patriots playing with a mostly injured secondary. The Eagles won their first Super Bowl, with a mostly weak secondary. But both of those teams had dominant pass rushes and really smart schemes and really smart coordinators. And guess what? So I'm a huge believer in that, but starting to get to $40 million, I guess you're betting on how much the cap is going to keep going up. But you are playing with some players that have started to get injured a little more. Rarely does a player get older and get injured less. So yes, I would have done the deal, but I never would have waited that long and taken the risk of the market getting away from me like that.
Yeah, you would have done it earlier because, there's no question when you say stuck, I was saying that a different way of using, I guess, the phrase stuck is that when you go in on Rodgers, right, and this is a 1 to 2 years if you're lucky, 2 years if you're lucky, gambit, then you're not gonna go into that one season with T.J. Watt holding out or holding in or all of that stuff. At least they got it done before training camp. They had to do it. You had to do it.
Yeah, you absolutely had to do it for all the reasons you mentioned. Plus, it's their personality. They probably care as much about the nature of the locker room and the positive feelings about who you're working for as any team in the league. And they've obviously changed some things as they got a new general manager in Con this year. But I don't think that's going to change. I think that's inherent to the Rooney family and the Rooney culture and philosophy. So for all the reasons you said, plus the fact that they so strongly believe in having a positive, appreciative locker room, and they think the only way you get that is by treating players the right way, it had to get done, and it had to get done before camp started.
What do you think's going through the mind of Adam Peters, the general manager in Washington, with Terry McLaurin being spotted outside of a yoga class today rather than being in training camp with the team, Joe?
I think he's upset, and it's hard to know, kind of whose side here you want to be sympathetic to, because I know Dan Quinn very well. I was part of the group that hired him in Atlanta. To be honest, I recommended we hire him in Cleveland, but got overruled. He cares a lot about the locker room as well. So does Adam. I think they want to set the tone that you work hard for us, you do the right things, we're going to reward you. So I suspect that McLaurin is being extremely aggressive. Now, there's two groups of possible comps he could be using on his deal. You got, Jefferson and Chase that got $35 to $40 million a year in another exploding market. But then you got a real large number of $28 to $30 million per year, very good players, including A.J. Brown, who re-signed after some of these deals were done and took, I think it was $28.5 on the New Year's of his deal. So some really good receivers in that $30 million. Now, if McLaurin is asking to be in that, Chase Jefferson deal, that's a bad situation for the Commanders because you want to keep him happy. You want to retain him. But I think he's literally like $5 to $10 million over what he should be asking for, if that's the case. On the other hand, if he is asking to be in this batch of players at $30 million per year, and then, shame on the Commanders for not getting it done, keeping a good player, setting the right message. But I just know Dan too well, and Adam's a little less, but a little bit. I can't believe that unless the ask is just so aggressive, they feel they have to take a stand, why that deal wouldn't be done. So I tend to think the player may be a little over asking at the moment. But I still think it will get done, by the way.
Yeah, right. Because, again, in the same thing that I was saying about you're not going to have T.J. Watt in the midst of some sort of contractual standoff when you've got 1 year, most likely, of having Aaron Rodgers there to get you to the playoffs and finally win a playoff game for the Steelers fans that have been waiting close to a decade for that or closing in on that. I mean, after Jaden Daniels' remarkable rookie season, what are you going to take away his favorite receiver? You're gonna go through some sort of monetary standoff on that, going into this massively big season with lots of opportunity. It makes no sense.
This is exactly what the agent is saying when he's talking to the player. If he's talking to anybody on the media, this is exactly what he's saying. He said, "Listen, I got a top-notch player. They have to get the deal done. I just need to stay strong. The player needs to support me and let me be tough. And I'm going to get him a really good deal, and it will be there in time for him to still have a really good season," which, by the way, isn't necessarily true. Trey made this comment the other day, and we did this at the Eagles. When a player holds out, and more than a couple of days, so consequential holdout, his risk of injury in the season goes up dramatically. So some of these people that are waiting, thinking, I may save a little bit on the deal, or I just want to not create a precedent that hurts me on other deals, whatever their rationale is. It could actually have the opposite effect. They increase the chance that the first year of the deal, there's always the most money the first year of the deal because you got the signing bonus or whatever they're going to call it in that year plus a salary. Mm-hmm. You're running the risk of not getting what you deserve for that first year by letting them hold out. So there better be a pretty significant gap or you ought to get it done. Same thing with the Bengals rookie Steward who's holding out. There's no way that the language they're asking for, which at least Mike Brown claims only is protecting them in case the player who has had some trouble in his past got in more trouble, that he would not continue to have his guarantees. At least that's what Mike says. If that is the issue, all the player has to do is make sure he behaves well, and he's asking for nothing. So there's no way to rationalize missing camp, now missing training camp, over a language issue like that may be harsher than most players, even the Bengals, have signed in the past. But if all you have to do is make sure you stay out of trouble and the owner is asking for something completely meaningless, if you do that, it's very hard to justify holding out. And with the history of the past, it's a little bit justifiable that the Bengals would be seeking that. I understand that if you have a player, for example Mike Brown used, he gets into a domestic problem and there's no consequence professionally to him, and all the Bengals seem to be asking for is the guarantee goes away. So they can still keep him, they can still pay him the money, all that kind of stuff, but it's not guaranteed. It just gives them leverage to try to make sure he's behaving and acting the right way.
Well, have you ever heard of a player say that it's apparent that they're not into about winning, and then leaves camp before he even plays a snap in the NFL? I mean, that I imagine to somebody like Mike Brown, that's got to be like nails on a chalkboard, right? Like that yes. Had to piss him off, to be straight up on that.
Yeah, front. This is the problem they have now. There's no way to get into this situation and not have some emotions start to creep in. And the enemy of a good outcome in a negotiation is emotions. You got to just stay very calm, very practical. Stay with the facts. But once you reach this point, there's emotions involved, whether you like it or not. I don't care how patient you are, how even-tempered you are. It's just natural. People in this business, people playing, they're competitive. So hit this point, there's definitely frustration and some personal feelings that are hurt.
So what is Mike Brown doing with Trey Hendrickson right now? You know, Duke Tobin with Trey Hendrickson right now, do you think?
Same questions. I saw that Schefter reported that correctly, that the recent big deals have 3 years guaranteed in them. He also reported that so far the Bengals have offered 1 guaranteed. I don't know if that's correct or not. That would be very unfair and justify Hendrickson's actions. I do have to say that I think the fact the 32.5 sacks of the last 2 years in his case is a little bit misleading. He's still a very good player. He's still way underpaid. He deserves a sizable raise. But if you watch the tape of last year, watch which games against which players he got his sacks, you would say, you know what, he's starting to descend a bit. So I think he's a little bit below that group, and maybe that's the nature of the dispute, or maybe it's the length of the guarantee. But same thing. They have no chance of having a good season without it. And they already have some big challenges to do that with the way the defense is. But they have no chance if they lose the only proven pass rusher on the team. So unless he's being extremely unreasonable, they got to find a way to get that done, and sooner, not later.
Yeah, and then, you know, obviously Joe Burrow was at the podium yesterday, and inevitably the quarterback is going to be asked about this. And, you know, you're a longtime executive, in this league. I wonder how you think this soundbite landed in Cincinnati with all of these negotiations clearly going on or not behind the scenes.
Yeah, obviously disappointing. You know, you'd like to have all your guys out there day one to try to build that cohesion that I was talking about earlier. But it's not how it usually works out. You know, it's a business, and that is how it's gone.
That was a double sigh right there at the end, Joe. Like,
he was not masking his frustration very well, was he?
No, but how does that play into it on a negotiation? You want to talk about emotions? You're most important for the, all due respect to everybody on the Bengals, highest paid employee is saying this.
I think it matters. I really do, and I give Joe credit. You know, I'm not sure many players are in the position where they should try to be the GM, and he clearly didn't really want to comment, but at the same time, he didn't want to not support, his fellow player. And obviously, he does want him there. You don't have to even ask him the question. You know that. But, the Bengals have a long history, and it isn't, being aggressive financially to maximize your chances of winning, kind of on all fronts. And now you got a quarterback that, has a chance to be one of the greats, certainly one of the top, say, 5 in this era. You could argue even much higher than that if you wanted to, and I wouldn't push back. And, he's being deprived of the chance that he should have by some decisions that are being made that don't put, football first. I think that there's a lot of guys, and Burrow appears to be with them, that obviously they love making a lot of money. They want to maximize their own income. But I still think if you put most of them against the wall and force them to tell the truth, they care more about winning than they do about the money. It doesn't mean the money isn't important. It doesn't mean they're not fighting. Just like every one of us that ever worked for a living wanted to get paid the most we could, within whatever is reasonable. But then you find yourself in a situation where you should be, establishing yourself partially through advancing through the deep into the end of the season, over the end of the season, maybe into the Super Bowls multiple times. He's being deprived of that opportunity in the last few years, and I think he fears it could go forward that way too.
And the last question on the Bengals, and then I want to talk to you about Chiefs and Eagles before I let you go on the rest of your day here, Joe, is a cash flow question about the Bengals. Is that fair? Because you got to put money in escrow for guaranteed dollars, and we were always talking about if the Bengals might be thinking about that. Is that a fair question to ask or wonder about all this, Joe, or no?
I'm going to say a little bit. I mean, the profitability of all of the teams in the league is such that the Bengals have to may use up, let's just say it that way, a larger percentage of their potential earnings than, for example, teams like the Eagles and Bears and Cowboys and teams like that. But they can still do it and have a meaningful profit at the end of the year unless they're really mismanaging the opportunities the franchise provides. So it is a little bit harder. It is some greater sacrifice on the parts of the owner. but it's not like some of the other sports, or even the way it was not that long ago with football, where you could have the bottom few teams in the league literally not making much profit. It's not the case anymore. The last two CBAs have put the league in a position, and like television contracts, where every team in the league is doing well. But some still do better than others. So I'm not going to say zero. But the Bengals could still have a reasonable profit, in my opinion, and be able to afford player salaries and re-signing of players like most of the teams in the league are doing.
All right, let's finish up this conversation with a question that is potentially silly to ask on July 24th, but you have called your shot here before saying, Eagles and Chiefs, they're built in such a way that we're going to see them, winning Super Bowls again, if not trying to win a Super Bowl against each other again. Last year, they tried it again. You think this is another one? You think we might see it again this year? Joe, what do you think?
I think they're both still outstanding franchises, and they're not done appearing in Super Bowls in the near. I happen to think both of them won't make the Super Bowl this year. I mean, one is I just think the Bills are just too good to keep almost getting there, although I lived through that, and the Eagles went to 5 championship games in 8 years and only appeared in 1 Super Bowl, and we lost it. So it can happen. I know too well, still have the scars from it. But I just think Sean's a really good coach. They get continuity in the coordinators. They got great line play on both sides of the ball. And Josh Allen is a true difference maker. So I just don't think they're going to keep getting close and not get there. So I think they're getting there. And I think the Eagles are still very good. It's totally realistic that they'll get to the Super Bowl. I could be wrong. But I think people are underestimating the quality of what they lost. Now, they have some people on the roster that can replace some of those people. But they lost 2 really good defensive linemen. They lost Graham, would be a third, although he didn't play the whole year last year. I think he played like the first 4 games or something like that. They lost a starting corner. They've lost some depth. They're counting on some young players in the secondary, some that haven't played much yet, a few that started to play and look like they have it. So I think that the Eagles are a little bit more likely to still be really good, could easily make the Super Bowl, but I think there's a chance that a couple of the other teams have risen up to the point where they have as good a chance or better.
Give me the names of those teams. What do you think?
So my surprise kind of is Tampa Bay, which I think people are kind of underestimating.
Okay.
And rarely do you see a team get into the Super Bowl that doesn't have strong lines, and I think they have that. And an excellent coach in Todd Bowles. Again, one year I recommended Dan Quinn in Cleveland. The next year I recommended Todd Bowles. And obviously we didn't hire either of them. And after the Jets experience, I'm sure you didn't think much of Todd Bowles, but I think
no, I just thought it was, again, just, cards are stacked, man, frequently when you're trying to coach the Jets with a new quarterback there. But so Tampa and who? Would the Rams be on that list for you, Joe?
No, well, I think the Rams have the NFC is a much harder pick for me than the AFC.
Right.
But I am actually going with Minnesota. I think that they finally upgraded their offensive line. I think that will really help the quarterback. I think the coach is outstanding. The scheme. Listen, we had Andy Reid in Philadelphia. When McNabb got hurt, we won almost as many games. It wasn't because Donovan wasn't great and invaluable. It was because Andy was so good and the rest of the staff under him, so they knew exactly how to take advantage of the strength. So McCarthy's going to need a little time, but I think he's going to do well. And I think everything around him is improved on a team that was already, very good. So that would be my favorite. My sleeper would be Tampa Bay.
Joe Banner, I love it. As I texted you, love our chats, man. They're great. Look for more of my texts and calls, and we'll get you back on as long as you're willing. Appreciate it.
Enjoy it as well.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show live weekdays from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern on Roku Sports Channel in the U.S.